Most leaders will need data. I mean, now they're saying that you cannot actually be a leader later on in life if you don't understand AI. So data is obviously mandatory. In fact, I think we shipped our first version of a full-fledged from zero to shipped out in 4 months, the entire thing with the team of 5 people. The other thing was also realized while I was at Healthify, I was part of the leadership team, so we had done a lot of pilots on mental health. I definitely going to be the next frontier, guys. I think in the next 10 years, it's going to become really big as a space. If you happen to look at the SoulUp website, you will not discover any content. And there's a reason why we've done that, because it aligns with our belief that too much content is a bad thing for mental health. Building a company is very similar, or in the process, you end up building yourself as people. So you have to be cognizant of that. So it's a great journey to be on. If anybody here is planning to start out, you will realize that it will be like building yourself again. I was initially working for a pharma consulting firm, then went to ISB, then worked for a couple of healthcare companies. I was in Bangalore back then. I mean, I'm still in Bangalore, but back then there was very little in healthcare in Bangalore. So didn't really find anything interesting. Then took a maternity break, and then that's when I first started working with Healthify, which was my first formal stint with the startup world. And then took a career break after 5 years of being at Healthify. And now I'm working with SoulUp. Started SoulUp. Key thing that I've realized is that I'm way off target. I spoke to some students today morning, and I've end up speaking to so many people every day as part of SoulUp. I realized that a lot of us do a lot of planning with our lives, thinking, pehle ye karna hai, then we'll do this, or phir ye karenge. With most people, I'm sure you'll ultimately uncover that you end up way off target. You don't really land up where you thought you would. So while it's good to plan, it's always also good to understand that you will have to end up going with the flow and enjoy the journey, because it may take you somewhere completely different. But obviously, everything has its own. It's important. Next slide, please. It's important because you've got to commit completely to the moment, and you will see in retrospect that everything ultimately will be useful for you. Your journey will pay you back, maybe sometimes immediately and sometimes years later. Again, this was not a question back then, but I'm sure a lot of you sometimes think about whether you want to work for big companies, and now the startup culture is so much bigger. This is back then around 2007, 2008 when I graduated, and it was almost a given that you would end up working for a large consulting firm or a big conglomerate. A lot of people now think that it's not as sexy to do that, but I actually, in retrospect, think that it was a great thing to work for a consulting firm right off the bat. Some things that you learn much harder, maybe in more informal setups of startups, but consulting firms will teach you very well, is the importance of structure and what it can bring to the table. A lot of startups are not as structured. Working with a consulting firm tells you what process means. One mistake, however, that I did while I was at ZS was, and again, this is way back when startups were not as popular. So to start up was a very risky thing, and also in some cohorts frowned upon. I started building my own startup, but I did it on the side. And that was manufacturing. We were manufacturing NWPP bags, the kind of bags that you see that come with grocery delivery now. And that was almost unheard of 10 years ago. And we started doing that. It was doing really, really well. But obviously, the biggest mistake we made at that point was we were doing it alongside a full-time consulting role, which is the worst way to build a startup or to even participate in one. Honestly, if we hadn't done it, then it would have become much bigger and would have done really well, because it was a front runner in building those kind of bags, which are now, that's the only thing you use. The no plastic thing had only begun then. But we did it on the side, and then we just gave up, and that was a very bad mistake. But yeah, that's what I learned. Never to time on work. I think before SoulUp, one notable thing that I was a part of, and I'm immensely thankful, was I was part of the startup called Healthify Me. There were hardly any healthcare startups in Bangalore. So this was one of them, and they were actually looking for somebody to work with numbers. They had no analyst on the board, and since I have a background in analytics and health, I joined them because I was coming from maternity break. It happened to be close to where I was staying. Literally two decisions like that, which ultimately panned out beautifully for me, thankfully. But I joined them as their first analyst. I was the only analyst in a team of 200 people. And then I ended up building their data science and analytics team, which was a great thing. Because Healthify later on in the years evolved to be a very AI and data science focused startup. As part of leading AI and data science at Healthify, also led the creation of what was then the world's first virtual fitness coach called RIA. Again, when I was studying at IIT, that was 2007, there was no concept of data science, no concept of machine learning at all. So all of this was very, very new. Again, why it benefited, like I said, you have to commit to the moment. I was coming from a biotech background, very research-based field. So researching things came very naturally to me, and all of this was very, very new. So we were working on it in 2017 and literally looking at research papers that were published 1 month or 2 months ago. So it was very cutting edge work. Then we ended up rolling it out in a very small frame of time. I think for anybody looking to build a career in general, obviously data is important. Most leaders will need data. I mean, now they're saying that you cannot actually be a leader later on in life if you don't understand AI. So data is obviously, mandatory. If you're looking to build a career in data science, then there are two kinds of people that at least I've seen in my career till now. There are the engineering side or the computer science side data scientists who ultimately might become ML engineers or head ML engineering teams. And there are those business side data scientists who understand business well but may not be hardcore hands-on coders. So there are two kinds of data scientists that you will often encounter. You might fall into one of those categories if you're looking to build a career in data science. I was in the business category. I understood numbers very well, but I was never a coder. Coding is something that I learned a little bit of when I was at Healthify, but I was still business first. But that really helped us because if you're working for a startup, unless until you're working for an AI first startup, which is building products, their core product is an AI product. I think it's important for all of us to realize, and a lot of you are sitting in, maybe coming from a B school or even people from outside today, if there are any. It's important to understand that all AI products need to be business first. And we also learned it the hard way because when we were building this, we had two options. One is to go with a very noob team who was reading papers very much like me, where I was leading the team and kind of building something for the user. And then we had the option, and we tried it, was to hire exceptionally good AI talent. And we ended up hiring great AI talent. And what happened was we actually weren't able to ship out anything with them. Because when you're coming from hardcore engineering background, sometimes you don't put business first. So it becomes like a painter trying to paint something, but nobody is looking at that painting. And you're painting for the joy of painting, not for the joy of selling that painting. So it was really important. What we realized was we wanted to shift away from that and build with a very, very business first mindset, saying what does the user want? What do we need to do to get there? And we'll only add AI as much as we need to add AI, and we won't go over engineer anything. That helped us save costs, that helped us ship out really quickly. In fact, our inexperience in having built AI initially really helped us. Because then you use the shortest path to get to a product rather than use the perfect path, which startups don't usually have the liberty of. So we ended up shipping it much earlier. In fact, I think we shipped our first version of a full-fledged from zero to shipped out in 4 months, the entire thing with a team of 5 people. So it was done very, very quickly. And we were obviously, the benefit was it was very deep as a model, but it was very small. I mean, the entire purview was fitness and nutrition. We weren't building what people now call generalized models or large language models. We were building a very narrow focused model. But we were able to ship it out rather quickly and then launch it to the press in 4 months straight, from zero to nothing. Around 10 years into my career, I also realized that why am I doing all this work? Why am I killing myself over a job that I may or may not do it, in the longer run? And then very quickly understood was that for me, money was freedom I was earning money to buy freedom, not earning money to buy more, to get more money. But that is a very personal choice for me. That's how, because tried to take a step back after having worked for 5 rigorous years at Healthify and realized that any money earned needs to buy us freedom. Otherwise, it's not worth it. At least for me and me and my husband. So as a couple, we realized we need to do that. And then because we had that, we realized how do we use it. So then that is when we decided to take a step back and took a big career break. At that point, it wasn't a career break. It was literally a move away from corporate life. It turned out to be a break because I came back to build SoulUp. But at that point, realized that we've earned the money we want and now we need freedom. Moved to Auroville. I don't know if anybody's aware of Auroville. It's a very small township near Pondicherry. But we moved to Auroville. It's an international township of 3,000 people. We moved there and we were volunteering and we thought we had moved for good, that we were done. And it's really nice. It's, by the way, they do one of the world's leading sustainability experts come from this place. So a very rich culture. We moved there thinking we are done and we can now live the life that we wanted, and we were there. But along the way, during that volunteering period again, when you go with the flow, you realize that life has different plans for you. COVID struck right after our move to Auroville, very close to that move. So a lot of people obviously were, going through their own emotional crisis, and that's when we started doing something within Auroville. And I was trying to do that because I had the time, because volunteering didn't take as much of my time. And that through that volunteering process, through those conversations is, how SoulUp eventually came out of that. That wasn't something that was planned. I never wrote a B plan for SoulUp. I think somebody asked me this morning, how did you arrive at the idea? Why did you do this? And it was very, very organic. I never wanted to be a founder or do any of that. Ultimately, it was something that we were doing and we wanted to do more of because we thought it was helping people, and that's just how it evolved. It was very, very organic. The other thing was also realized while I was at Healthify, I was part of the leadership team, so we had done a lot of pilots in mental health. Realized that it was obviously definitely going to be the next frontier, guys. I think in the next 10 years, it's going to become really big as a space. There's already enough research showing that it's rapidly falling, but there's definitely going to be a lot of, if anybody can crack mental health, they're definitely sitting on a big mountain of gold, if that's what the, ultimate goal is. But it's going to be the biggest frontier that we'll ever mount. So it was a tough problem to solve, and very hard to look away from it, because it's largely been unsolved. I'm sure if all of you think you'll not be able to name a single mental health company that's done well coming out of India. So there's not a single one. So it's something that's not been solved, and which was why it was very interesting, why it was special, and we saw something working and decided to do more of it. It's just very hard to turn away from a tough problem. So that's why we started. But coming to SoulUp and what really it is about, I think a lot of us really look at emotional wellness in a very restricted way, where we say emotional wellness might mean depression or anxiety or something more serious is probably a mental illness, which is not true at all. All of us go through our own emotional challenges, and mental wellness is like a big bell curve. One extreme of it is diagnosed condition. Otherwise, everybody has mental health. Your mental health might be great or you might be thriving, but doesn't mean you don't have mental health. Everybody has it. You might be at different stages of how you're doing with respect to your mental health. And I think what we really need to understand is what is our primary need when we feel emotionally challenged. And I'm sure all of us have been there, but if we really think about it, what is really our primary need? What is our first instinctive need when we feel कि अरे ये क्या हुआ या फिर how am I going to deal with this? Through a lot of user interviews and through our own experience, we understood that there are only two things that people typically need when they're going through a tough time. One is you're looking for support, and which comes best from people who understand the situation. And second is you're looking for what can be called intelligence. You're trying to understand that is this even a problem? And if this is a problem, what can be done about it? What we realized was that both support and intelligence can be given by somebody who's already gone through it. We do that professionally all the time when we ask each other, how did you land that sales job, or how did you, learn something, or how did you make that career switch? So we do that professionally all the time. But when it comes to our personal issues, we usually never do that. I'll come to it, but that's what we are trying to do now, where we are saying that, look, running into people who have the same, with professional work, it's very easy. But with somebody who's got the same problem, now imagine if I say, look, I have a very toxic boss, right? Or I'm going through postpartum depression. I'll give you my example. I was going through a severe case of postpartum depression. I, at that point, didn't run into anybody who had ever gone through it. You know, if you discover somebody who's gone through a similar problem, it is usually very luck-based. It's serendipity. Somebody is saying, you know, I want to maybe not have children in life, or saying that I have a difficult decision to take, or I have this rare skin condition. What do I do? It's very, very unlikely that you'll run into somebody who has that same problem. It's also very unlikely that you will be able to discuss your challenge with them. You'll have that equation or that space to discuss it with them. It exists, the need exists, but there's no way to very efficiently or in a structured way discover other people who've gone through the same thing. So what we end up building now as SoulUp, what I at least try and term as a LinkedIn for emotional wellness. You use LinkedIn for professional things all the time, where you say, look, this person has had a journey that I want to be on, so let me connect with them. Or maybe there's something to learn, some perspective to exchange. It's called peer support. Peer are people that you share your life journey with. But peer support is also very, very researched. There's at least 3 decades of research behind this. It's already done in pockets in the US and in Europe, but it's never really been launched as a large network anywhere in the world, let alone India. So it's a very, very novel idea. So I love talking about it. But that's what it is. And we believe, and at least what we've understood, that it's going to be the future of mental health, because it's scalable. There are no boundaries to how you can scale peers. Therapy is limited by the number of therapists. So it's very, very scalable, because everybody, each of us sitting here in this hall is a peer for something, because all of us have gone through a challenge that somebody else can benefit from. So that's why we ended up building something like this. And it can be in different formats. You can speak to somebody one-on-one. You can have a group discussion around it. There could be formats like accountability groups, where suppose I say that, you know, I have a smoking issue, and you get together with 5 other people who also want to quit smoking, and you quit smoking together. So that's also, again, people who've been on the same journey and can help each other out with their perspective and support, and you do that together. So peer support actually has multiple formats which can be very useful. A lot of people ask us, we're building SoulUp, hey, there's no content on the website. So if you happen to look at the SoulUp website, you will not discover any content. And there's a reason why we've done that, because it aligns with our belief that too much content is a bad thing for mental health. So anybody churning out a lot of content probably doesn't understand mental health as well, because the more content you go through, the more anxiety it will trigger in you. There's enough content already. So anybody who starts out a mental health startup saying, you know, we'll churn out content and that's going to be the centerfold of what we offer, probably doesn't understand it. So it was a deliberate move, even though you lose out on engagement and other vanity metrics, but it was a deliberate move. So these are tough choices that anybody here, sitting here in this audience, thinks they want to start up. You'll have to make those tough choices, because you lose out on things that people think are obvious or will get you users or visitors, but may not, at the end of the day, help with outcomes. Especially in healthcare, I think that's very, very true. You have to make tougher choices. At the end of the day, we realized that since none of this is not really being done in India or even the world at a larger scale, what we're doing is building a category creator. We're building something that is its own category, peer support. It's usually, there's a misnomer, it's a very loosely used term, but peer support built right is its own category. And anytime anybody here decides to build a category creator, you will see that you will only need 2 main things. I shouldn't say only, I mean, they are important. One is you have to build a lot of trust. You have to build trust in the solution that you're offering. You have to build trust in the brand that you are, that what you're offering is going to solve the problem. And second, that as a brand, you're going to do a good job. So you have to build trust. So anytime you're building a category creator, that is the first prerequisite. The second prerequisite is the narrative around it, that you're able to communicate it well. In things which are harder to communicate, healthcare being one of them, mental health being a tougher case, you have to build the narrative around it well. So those are the 2 prerequisites or literally, your make or break when you're working on something that is brand new and that there is no precedent for, that you're able to achieve both of them. So that's at least the phase that we are in. Ultimately, for anybody who's looking to start up, guys, and again, this is my personal opinion, you will realize that building a company is as good, is very similar, or in the process, you end up building yourself as people. So you have to be cognizant of that. So it's a great journey to be on. If anybody here is planning to start out, you will realize that it will be like building yourself again. And that's enthralling. It's actually, I don't know if it puts a lot of pressure on you, but at least I have found that to be true. In the process of building SoulUp, I have found myself to become more resilient, more patient, more humble, and a lot of other things that I was nowhere close to being. So I'm very thankful, and I think anybody who wants to start out should be aware of that, because you'll find it so much more meaningful. Even if startups fail, you'll realize that you've become so much of a better person because you've gone through that process. So yeah, that's the only other thing that I wanted to say.